Morning kids, last week was Tory party conference and Prime Minister Liz Truss, Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng and Home Secretary Suella Braverman all gave speeches. And when you look at those speeches together, you can see that the Conservative Party has no real principles, only seeking authoritarian power over everyone, mainly because of how inconsistent and borderline confused their messaging is.
I believe that you know best how to spend your own money.
Now that's the traditional Conservative idea that the government shouldn't need to take as much tax money because they shouldn't be interfering in our lives that much anyway. But that message isn't for the working class people that the Conservative Party claims to be looking out for right now. Because yeah, if you're rich, you might choose to spend your money on private healthcare rather than the NHS. It's unlikely that you use the bus and you probably live in an area that already has the best roads, schools and hospitals. But somebody on minimum wage can't just choose to spend their money fixing the local potholes or on private schooling. So every time you hear the Tories talking about small government and letting people choose how they spend their own money, they're talking about cutting public services so that the rich can buy swimming pools. And as for levelling up the poorest parts of the UK, this next bit is straight up confused.
It's wrong to invest only in the places that are thriving. We need to fund the furthest behind first. And for too long, the political debate has been dominated by the argument about how we distribute a limited economic pie. Instead, we need to grow the pie so that everyone gets a bigger slice.
In the space of 18 seconds, Liz Truss says that we need to give more money to the poorest areas of the country in order to achieve economic equality, and then immediately after says there's been too much focus on redistributing wealth in order to achieve economic equality. This is what happens when you know that the people of the UK want a much fairer country, but you're speaking to Tory members who explicitly don't. And so here's Liz Truss lying to both in order to cling to power. Then both she and Chancellor Kwarteng talked about the consequences of low economic growth.
Low growth means lower wages, fewer opportunities, and less money to spend on the things that make life better.
Action which slows down our economy cannot be the policy of any serious party serious about growth.
In 2016, Liz Truss herself said that leaving the EU single market would damage our economic growth. In 2021, the government's Office of Budget Responsibility says that leaving the EU single market has cut £100 billion off our economy. So she said that leaving the single market would damage growth. According to her own government, leaving the single market has damaged growth. The decision to leave the single market as well as the EU was made by her Tory government, not the people, and now the UK is set to have the slowest growth among the top G20 economies. And yet here's what she and her Chancellor have to say about people who damage our economic growth.
A party which is not serious about growth can never be considered fit for office. Stifling red tape puts up too many barriers for entrepreneurs looking to scale up. There are too many rules for small business owners.
The red tape created by UK products and services no longer being covered as part of the EU single market is precisely what has cut £100 billion of our economic productivity, because UK exporters now have to comply with multiple sets of rules, which is especially expensive for small business owners. And yet Kwasi Kwarteng says it's
retained EU law holding our country back.
The simple fact is there is no other single government policy that is reducing the UK's economic productivity by more than 4%. So the people who support Brexit are objectively the biggest threat to UK growth. And yet Liz Truss says,
I will not allow the anti-growth coalition to hold us back.
And who does she say is in that coalition?
The vested interests dressed up as think tanks.
You're complaining that our economy is being damaged by vested interests dressed up as think tanks. Motherfucker, are you serious? You just took a director of the shadily funded Brexit-supporting IEA think tank, made them your special advisor immediately before trying to give £2 billion in tax breaks to the richest people in the UK while the pound crashed. The gas-powered hypocrisy.
The Brexit deniers.
None of us are denying that Brexit happened. The only people denying the impact of Brexit are the Tories.
And we will face down the separatists who threaten to pull apart our precious union, our family.
Their Brexit created such a divide between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK that the Northern Irish government stopped functioning. And while we're at it, here's another piece of international hypocrisy.
We became too dependent on authoritarian regimes for cheap goods and cheap energy.
She says this while actively trying to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, claiming they're not as bad as Russia. Because with the regular mass beheadings, the waging a war in Yemen that's killed 150,000 people, and occasionally chopping up a journalist or two, the Saudi government are basically teddy bears. Okay, let's look at how they want to police society.
We stand for the law-abiding majority of Britons.
You've always got to ask yourself what a government means when they say the law-abiding majority, because they're the ones who actually make the laws. So they're the ones who decide whose behaviour is law-abiding and whose isn't.
Now, many on the left, they want to defund the police. Well, I say to the militants, I say to the anarchists and the extremists.
Now, she's obviously referring to the movements for racial equality like Black Lives Matter, but she's using the usual politician tactic of pointing to the most radical elements of a movement in order to discredit the whole thing as extremist. And given that UK police stop and search black people 7 times more than white people, you've got to ask yourself why a politician would be trying to discredit the fight for racial equality.
No, I will always back our police.
Translation, despite clear evidence of systemic racism within UK policing, the anti-racists can bugger off.
That's what being on the side of the law-abiding majority means.
Okay, so that majority doesn't include black people. Got it.
It's not only wrong for the police to take the knee, we need common sense policing, unashamedly, unapologetically, on the side of the law-abiding majority.
Oh no, I heard you the first time. Black people are supposed to fear the police. Got it.
The law-abiding majority expect every force to investigate every neighbourhood crime.
That's pretty weird coming from a government that spent 7 months telling us there was nothing to see here after the illegal Downing Street parties. So being on the side of the law-abiding majority means over-policing black people and under-policing Tory politicians. Again, message received.
The police must have all the powers that they need to stop the protesters who use guerrilla tactics and bring chaos and misery to the law-abiding majority.
I was in London on Saturday and saw the police physically carry away protesters who were blocking the road. They already have these powers. What Braverman is trying to do is justify silencing all protests. Now listen to how confused, or really hypocritical, this next bit about British society is.
I fear that we are losing sight of the core values and the culture. The left are attacking our profound, elemental values, wanting to replace them with the poison of identity politics. Integration was part of the quid pro quo. Now that didn't mean abandoning their heritage, but it did mean adopting British identity.
When she says identity politics, she's talking about ethnic minorities, LGBT, immigrants, and the left-wing drive to protect them and celebrate the cultures and identities related to them. And yet, almost in the same breath, she complains that our British culture is under threat and that there's one sense of British identity that we must all conform to. So which is it? Is identity politics good or bad? It's almost as if the law-abiding majority that you're championing doesn't include ethnic minorities, LGBT people, immigrants, or any other minority group. Now, I want you to remember that notion of only dismissing identity politics when it suits them as we talk about this next bit.
I know the plan put forward only 10 days ago has caused a little turbulence. I get it.
He's making jokes and the Tories are laughing. Their mini-budget crashed the pound to the lowest point since the 1980s and 41% of mortgages were withdrawn, and they're making jokes. Now, they reversed the plan to cut taxes for millionaires just before the conference, so when Liz Truss took the stage, she and her entire government were looking economically incompetent. So this is what she comes out with.
I know how it feels to have your potential dismissed by those who think they know better.
Translation. You all think I'm economically dangerous right now and you think you can replace me with somebody better. But listen.
I remember as a young girl being presented on a plane with a junior air hostess badge. Meanwhile, my brothers were given junior pilot badges. It wasn't the only time in my life that I've been treated differently for being female or for not fitting in. And I stand here today as the first Prime Minister of our country to have gone to a comprehensive school.
Translation. I'm a woman and I'm working class, therefore don't kick me out. Now, I've already talked about how some of the criticisms that Tories have made against Liz Truss have stunk of sexism, attacking her for things that they would have never attacked Boris Johnson for. So she probably has a point. But isn't that what they'd call identity politics? Certainly if Labour had tried that defence. But now that it's useful to protect a Tory government, suddenly the patriarchy exists. And it's especially crazy when just seconds later she says,
let down by a Labour council who were more interested in political correctness.
But if a Labour MP had ever dared to suggest that it was wrong to give little boys pilot toys and little girls air hostess toys, are you really going to pretend that there wouldn't be an army of Tory MPs calling that political correctness gone mad? The hypocrisy of this party shows that it's not about principle, it's just about enforcing their will on the people of the UK. And so she goes on to defend the chaos caused by her budget by saying,
I knew that inaction would be unconscionable.
Which is the usual Tory tactic of, well, imagine if we'd done nothing. as if the bar for decent government is literally on the floor. And on refugees,
the largest group of small boats migrants are from Albania.
That relates to an unpublished report that we've only heard about through the Daily Mail. The fact-checking site Full Fact asked the Home Office for comment and they got no reply. And so all we have is the official Home Office figures for the last few years, which show that the majority of people are coming from countries where there's a legitimate reason to flee. But she then uses these questionable stats to argue that the people who cross the channel aren't real asylum seekers. She even had a segment of her speech which could have been titled, "We really care about the victims of human trafficking, but..." And goes on to say,
So if you deliberately enter the United Kingdom illegally from a safe country, you should be swiftly returned to your home country or relocated to Rwanda.
if you're fleeing torture or war and so you decide to come to the UK, maybe because you have family here, maybe because English is your second language, unless you can afford a flight, you pretty much have to travel through France because, you know, geography. So based on her logic, unless France is literally at war, then the UK, one of the richest countries in the world, a country that sometimes invades and still makes billions selling weapons that destabilize Middle Eastern countries, shouldn't accept a single refugee from there. Also, according to the International Refugee Convention, which the UK signed, asylum seekers are allowed to enter countries without permission as long as they apply for asylum within a reasonable period of time. It's also illegal to discriminate against refugees based on where they come from. You know, like taking Ukrainian refugees into our homes while sending Yemeni refugees to Rwanda. But to hell with international law?
A European court overrode our Supreme Court. And as a result, our first flight to Rwanda was grounded. We need to take back control.
And that really sums it up. She's using the Brexit slogan, and therefore the result of the 2016 referendum, to justify breaking international law in ways that are morally disgusting and have nothing to do with Brexit. They think they can do whatever they like to whomever they like, and they'll just pick and choose whichever principle is most convenient at the time to justify it, even if it makes zero sense. We need the Tories out of office now, and we need the Labour leader to start standing up for the progressive majority of the UK. Have a great week.